All rise. Thank you. You may be seated. We've gathered here today to remember and celebrate the life of Bob Donahue, who he was, what he did, and how he impacted our lives. It is with great sorrow the family announces the passing of Robert James Donahue of Sangudo, Alberta, on October the 25th, 2021, after a hard-fought battle with COVID-19. Bob is survived by his son Matthew Donahue of Sangudo, his brother Doug and Sandra Donahue of Grande Cache, Alberta, and his dear companion Angela Boudreau, and many dear relatives and friends. He was predeceased by his parents, James and Marjorie Donahue. The inurnment will take place at South Park Cemetery, followed by a luncheon at the Jaded Chef. Please remember when you go to the Jaded Chef that you wear your mask entering the building, and that you have your proof of vaccination and some photo ID ready to enter. You may come to the cemetery for the committal or go directly to the Jaded Chef. As we remember Bob today, let us first turn our attention to the Bible, which gives us hope that death is not the end of life, but the beginning of eternal life. Psalm 23 says, "The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. He makes me to lie down in green pastures. He leads me beside the still waters. He restores my soul. He guides me in the paths of righteousness for his name's sake. Yea, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil, for thou art with me. Thy rod and thy staff, they comfort me. Thou preparest a table before me in the presence of my enemies. Thou anointest my head with oil, my cup runs over. Surely goodness and mercy shall follow me all the days of my life, and I shall dwell in the house of the Lord forever." Let's pray. Heavenly Father, we come to you today with grieving hearts, in need of your comfort, your encouragement, and your peace. We recognize that you created each of us with a special purpose in mind, a special destiny in mind for us to fulfill, and you place people in our lives that help us to fulfill those purposes. Thank you for bringing Bob into our lives with his unique gifts and talents and personality. Father, let your presence be manifest in this place. Give us your strength. Let us feel your nearness, and we commit ourselves to you today. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen. At this time, I'd like to invite Catherine Blazer-Klein to come. She's a cousin of Bob's and would like to sing for us. Catherine, that was beautiful. At this time, I'd like to invite Reimer to come and talk to us about his friend.
I'll share with you my memories of Bob as a friend, a very close friend, a friend for 40 years. 40 years in which he was very much intertwined in my life and the life of my wife. He became part of the family. So it was a very wonderful friendship. And I hope to share some of that wonderfulness with you. Now, to go back in the beginning, how I met Bob was actually in 1980. You see, we lived in our house was over 100 years old. It had no insulation. And Bob was in the insulation business. Now, there was a government grant to encourage homes that were that old to get insulated. So we looked in the yellow pages and we picked Bob's business to come and insulate our home. Now, how do you insulate a home that's already standing? Well, you had to drill little holes in the wall, little round holes, and then Bob would come up with a pipe, and it was sort of a liquid insulation that he pumped into the wall. It was actually formaldehyde. But anyway, it was quite considered to be quite all right at that time. So I helped Bob drill holes, between the 2x4s, and we got to know one another and sort of became friends. And after he finished the job, he invited us over to his acreage in Roleview for a bit of, call it chicken kill. His parents were there, he was there, and they were going to butcher about 12 or a dozen chickens. And we were going to bring home some chickens. Now, that was a bit of an experience for us because we're sort of used to picking up chickens from Safeway. But here, these were alive chickens still running around when we came. And of course, we saw the whole process of butchering and defeathering. But also we had a great social time with Bob and his parents. And sort of a real beginning of a very warm friendship. Shortly after that, Amy and I, Amy is my wife, we were going to celebrate our 10th anniversary, and Bob invited us. He was going to host our anniversary at his little farm, and so we invited our friends and family, and Bob was a wonderful host. He had a great barbecue. Now, if you know Bob, he was a great cook, especially on barbecues. And it was just a wonderful get-together. So, at the same time, now as we got to know Bob, sometimes, maybe once a month, we went out to the Red Barn. Now, some of you might know the Red Barn was in Morinville. It was a dancing hall. In the shape of a barn, but very, very large. It was a great big hall and a platform for the musicians. And so we went out there maybe once a month, and quite often Bob came with us because he enjoyed that. I was still in his matching days, and they would serve a supper, and then the band would play. Most of the time it was the Emeralds, very popular. They played a lot of family music, but it was great fun. Now, to jump a little bit ahead, maybe a year or two later, of course, we found out that the installation was actually not the best. There was a lot of problems with the insulation. A lot of people got sick. Now, for Amy and I, we did not notice anything, but other people that had it done were sort of toxic fumes. So the foam all had to be taken out. So, of course, who would take it out? It was Bob. Now, not only Bob himself, but a whole team of workers came. And how do you take out foam? You had to literally open up the walls. Now, of course, Amy and I lived in the house. So we, first of all, we started upstairs. We moved our bedrooms downstairs, and they opened up all the walls upstairs. It was quite a job. It lasted for about two weeks, yeah. And then they started downstairs. They opened up the walls from the outside. But it all got done. And when it was all finished, we had proper insulation, the way that you would have in your homes today. So it was, so it actually worked out all right, and it gave us more opportunities to work along with Bob. Now, Bob also was a great handyman. So for the next couple of years, Amy and I did a lot of renovations on our home, and Bob was always there to help us out. And one of the big jobs was we wanted to expand, enlarge our basement, because in the olden homes, the basement usually was very small. So we literally had to dig out the basement with a spade and shovel. And of course, Bob was there to give us a hand, as he always would. And so, as he was sort of a hand pick in his hand and hacking away, and then you would put the dirt into a pail, and from the pail through a window in the basement, and then from with a wheelbarrow to the back of the house. But anyway, here was Bob picking away with a hand pick, and he actually bust through our main water line. Now, so he called me Reiner, And here was already a great big flood in the basement, and I had to call the city to shut off the water, which they did, and it finally settled down a bit. And this was in the winter time, a bad time for this to happen, because we were without water for a whole month. So we got, well, our neighbors were very helpful, so we had to use their washroom, and they helped us out a great deal. So it all worked out, because, you know, when things go wrong, there are so many friends that are there to help you. So it all worked out really well. One of the great highlights of Bob is Bob was a great outdoors man, and he actually introduced us to backpacking. Now, Amy and I had been camping for quite a number of years. We were very good at this. Now, when I say camping, I'm talking about the soft touch. You know, you reserve a place, you phone in, you reserve a place, and then you drive up to your campground, and there's a picnic table and a nice fire pit. This is what I call soft touch camping, which Amy and I were very good at. But with Bob, backpacking was a different story. We had really not very much experience in that at all, in fact, none. So to begin with, Bob went with us to a store to pick out the right backpack, because when you go backpacking, whatever you need, you have to carry on your back. Now, backpacks, he picked out the right size. We had to carry about 40 to 50 pounds, so they had to be the right size. They had to fit properly, because you might be walking for 2 or 3 or 4 hours, so it better be comfortable. But Bob was a perfect guide, a perfect help. He knew all about this stuff. So on our first backpacking trip, I remember that quite well, into the mountains. We went up a slope, and here we were. I was carrying a 50-pound pack. Bob, actually his pack was a bit heavier, and Amy's about 40 pounds. But after about 1 hour, you know, I came to the end of my strength, because I said, Bob, I just can't go on anymore. I got to take a rest. But you know, Bob, very understanding and very accommodating. So we sat down for a while and rested, had maybe a banana to eat or something, and I was okay again. But you know, Bob, he had so much strength. He just went on. He carried more than I did, and it was great. It was a great experience. And when we started camp at night, of course, we put up a little shelter or a tiny little tent. He made a campfire. Now, a campfire, and to cook over a campfire is quite an experience too, because Bob knew how to cook the most delicious meal over a campfire. It was just a simple frying pan. And it was great after hiking or backpacking all day. Sometimes we even played little games of, for example, a word guessing game. I would think of some kind of a word or some kind of a phrase and try to act it out. And Amy and Bob would have to try and guess what I was acting out. And then we all took turns doing the same thing. It was a lot of fun. We actually did a number of trips over the years. And also Bob, we took along some other friends as well. And sometimes we were a whole group. So it was quite a thrilling experience to be introduced to backpacking that way. And for Amy and I, it really became very important, because later on, Amy, as an artist, we had a project in Carmana Valley on the west coast, and we had to actually just go by ourselves into the wilderness and for Amy to paint. And it was so helpful that we had the experience now that we knew how to backpack, we knew how to handle ourselves in the wilderness. There was one thing that I should mention on one of our trips. We were all finished backpacking, and we came back to our car to the parking lot. Of course, Bob was always very safety conscious, and we were, after all, in bears country, including grizzly bears. So Bob always carried a little gun with him, and he felt quite safe, and it was. We never encountered any bears, but when we came back, we finished our trip, we were in the parking lot, I said, Bob, I want to see this gun. I want to see what happens, because I expected a great big bang and a flash, enough to scare any grizzly bear away. So Bob said, yeah, sure. Click, click, click. Nothing happened. So, but what it did, even though of course we didn't know, but it made us feel safe. So all the time we were nervous about Bob, we felt totally safe. A good feeling. Those were some of the memories of Bob. Of course, many times he was over at our home too. Sometimes with his son Matthew later on, and for major dinners, for the Thanksgiving, for Christmas dinners or Easter dinners. Yes, Bob was very much part of our life. And when I think of Bob, I think of a great friend, one of the great ones in our life. And I say that with total respect, because he was so involved, so giving, so helpful. And as a friend, we could not have asked better. Yes.
Thank you, Reiner, for sharing those wonderful memories. I think a lot of you would have similar memories of Bob. This time I'd like to invite Alana, Bob's niece, to come and do a reading breath.
Little knew that day God was going to call your name. In life, we loved you dearly. In death, we do the same. It broke our hearts to lose you. You did not go alone, for part of us went with you the day God called you home. You left us beautiful memories. Your love is still our guide. And although we cannot see you, you are always at our side.
Thank you, Alana. Matthew, would you like to come and talk to us about your dad?
Yeah, my dad was just awesome. That's all I have to say for sure, but I'll go on with what I wrote here. My dad would be proud to see everyone who has come to give tribute to the life of my father today, and especially everyone who has traveled a long distance to be here. My father would be proud and thankful to know that his life was appreciated by all of you. My dad was everything to me that a son could ask for. He was always there to help me when I needed him the most. He guided me through thick and thin, and was always guiding me through this challenging world the best he could. He always kept things into perspective when things got hard for me, and was always able to see the bright side of the challenges I often faced. He was my rock. He was my best friend. He always lived his life with the glass half full. He was the one I always called to ask for guidance when life got hard, and always seen the bright side of any problem. He always said that any problem was a learning experience, and I truly learned to appreciate these words, and now more than ever. My dad was my hero. He was the most courageous and resourceful man. I never questioned if he loved me or cared for me, because he made it so obvious. I still feel his love now with each passing day. I am now living this life for both of us, and I'll forever miss you, Dad. My dad was my biggest fan, my best friend, and a role model to me in this life. We always dreamed of the future opportunities, laughed and spent quality time watching the Oilers and the Blue Jays. He just loved watching Connor McDavid dance on the ice and watching the young Blue Jays knock the home runs out of the park. The last Blue Jays game we watched together, they won 22-7 against the Baltimore Orioles. We had a blast watching them play so well. Me and my dad were so happy that night, and this was a fond memory of mine. I flash back at the times we spent ice fishing with his new girlfriend, Angie. The times spent camping and quadding with my uncle and cousins in Catamount for our graduation present. The times we went to the Oilers games together, and specifically the time we went to a playoff game against the Dallas Stars. My dad didn't have tickets, of course, but said no big deal. We can get some scalper tickets. I'm like, man, Dad, I sure hope we can get some tickets. We're driving all the way to Edmonton. He was right, and it was such a good experience. The Oilers were down 4-1 with 5 minutes left in the third period, and the building was clearing out. I'm like, Dad, why is the building clearing out? He's like, well, everybody thinks they're gonna lose. I'm like, Dad, I think they're gonna win. He's like, oh man, I hope so, this would be awesome. The Oilers went on to score 3 goals in less than 5 minutes, and then they scored an overtime to win the game 5-4. The fan in front of us jumped up so fast to cheer the game-winning goal that he spilled his entire drink all over me and Dad. Dad just looked up at me with his contagious smile, and we both laughed. I remember saying this was the best game I ever. I was so proud of my dad for taking me to the game, and for getting those scalper tickets, and we joyously listened to the 6:30 Chet post-game show all the way home. We were in our element, and we both loved Oilers hockey so much. I just loved spending time with my dad and going to sports games. Those were the good old days. I can't be more proud of the memories that I will forever cherish. You were so humble and kind, and would give the shirt off your back for me or for anyone else for that matter. And you did, Dad. You did that so often, and sometimes you honestly had to. It would never fit, no big deal. You were such a big guy, but had a heart of gold. I'll forever remember these lessons like this in life moving forward, and always be humble and kind, and always try to give a helping hand in the best way I can. My cheerful dad, beautiful, humble, and kind dad, took his last breaths on this earth at 12:12 on Monday, October 25th, after a hard-fought battle with COVID-19. I was holding his hand the whole time, and he will forever be remembered in my heart and soul. I will never forget that phone call I made on Saturday morning when he told me to quickly come to the hospital because I would have to walk the rest of this world on my own, and that you were going to die. I just cried so much, and as I called my mom to pick me up, I never expected to hear those words from my dad's mouth. You were my champion, my rock, my amazing dad, always so strong, seriously tough as nails, so humble and kind, and never seemed to complain about anything. You dealt with many challenges in your life, including hard problems, a massive stroke in 2008, when I thought I was going to lose you for the first time. The doctors said you would never walk again, and you defied all odds. You were a serious fighter and a real champion to watch. I always admired your courage and strength throughout this time on earth. You were even diagnosed with leukemia after your stroke and never let any of these things affect you. It never seemed to faze you. You were just one of those strong people that had courage and admiration. This showed me that your true self in so many ways, and you're an incredible role model for me in defying the odds that life can often throw at us. Life will often throw us a curveball, and you have showed me so many times what's possible if we have courage, strength, optimism, and remain humble and kind. I thank you for all these lessons you have taught me throughout your time in my life, Dad. I want you to know that you have not gone unnoticed, and you will forever have been a powerful role model to me, just a real life champion. And then I wrote this little poem and note to my dad. My beautiful, humble, and kind dad, he departed us for real. I could instantly feel. Into another world he went. It felt so surreal. At day's break I stood, and I knew something was wrong. That phone call I made was like my worst song. I stood at his bedside and said, "Man, Dad, why couldn't you have taken this vaccine for real? You were another life taken way too soon." My dad's last breath taken just past noon. Overcome with sadness and fatigue, I couldn't hold back the cascading tears flowing down my manly middle-aged cheeks. All I could feel was my childhood fears, the ones of losing my dad and so many tears. Memories like a blast of wind descended upon my conscious mind. Now I finally knew it was my time, the strength that I would have to find. I could so easily see your bright blue eyes. I could so easily see your strong, proud smile. He was such a courageous man. He was my lifelong fan. His smiling face greeted us all until it was time for him to fall. He always had instant laughter and undying optimism. Oh, I wish he could have seen this virus was for real. A deadly virus only willing to steal. It's one that devastates the people that are still living. It doesn't care if you're one of those people that's most giving. I will miss you forever, Dad, the one that helped give me life, along with my mom and one time your wife. Thank you for everything you've taught me throughout my life. Oh man, this tragedy and COVID-19 has cut through our family like a knife. I will always remember the happy times we had and how proud and honored I am that you were my dad. Now we mourn your loss that has changed me forever. Oh Dad, I promise that I will miss you forever. Thanks for being my dad. Oh man, I promise I'll be more clever. Oh Dad, I promise that I will miss you forever. On a day that we honor your demise, I stand up here and I completely realize that in order for me to be more successful and truly happy in this world, I'll have to stand up and be more wise, like the man you were so many times throughout my life. Oh, you were the best dad in my life. Oh, this causes me sharp pain like the wound of a sharp knife. It's a wound that is so freshly open. It's a wound that leaves me at this moment broken. It's a wound that will slowly have to close. It's a wound that I know will have to heal. But right now it's your day, and this I can completely feel. But right now it's your time, and this I know is completely real. So with all this said, and the years that have passed, today is the day that I'll have to lay you in the grass. As hard as this will be for me, today is the day that I will set your spirit free. You will forever live in my heart. You will forever live in my spirit. Oh Dad, I promise I will miss you forever. Oh Dad, I promise I will be more clever. Thank you so much for being my dad. Thank you so much for being the best dad I've ever had. Now I close this chapter, and I will miss you forever after.
Thank you, Matthew. Very well done. This time I'd like to invite Stan to come and do an instrumental for us. Thank you, Stan. Beautiful music. At this time, I'd like to invite Doug to come and to share with us about his brother.
Well, let's start out. I'd like to start out by breaking with tradition. I know that I'm going to be to a funeral. Oh, sorry. Is that better? I'd like to start out by breaking with tradition. I know that any time that we've been to a funeral, people play some beautiful music, say some wonderful things, and I guess it's just customary that we all just sit there. Well, I'd like you to wait a moment. Join me in thanking Catherine for her beautiful solo, Alana for her reading, Reiner for his kind words, Stan for his beautiful instrumental, Matthew for his kind words. So thank you. I pretty much held it together through all of this, but I think this is going to be a tough day. Anyhow, I'd like to thank someone you don't know, Jack Danig, a very good friend of mine, backpacking friend of Bob's, who helped put all the slides together, the pictures together. Earl for greeting you and interrogating you at the back door. Iris, who will be meeting you when you go to the Legion. A big thank you to Denny Lowry for all the help that he has provided, especially to Angie over the last 2 or 3 weeks. And to all of Bob's dear friends who have sent their condolences that couldn't attend today, and you know who you are. But the biggest thanks goes out to my wife Sandy. She's kept me organized and sane through all of this. Okay, let's see if I can get together. Bob was born August 18th, 1948. Size, huge. I'm surprised Mom decided to get pregnant again. Lucky for me, she did. We spent hours and hours going through family pictures, family photo books. I even found Rusty's birth announcement, 1946. Grandma Climbing's driver's license, 1979. And various pictures of Grandma and Grandma Climbing, Grandma and Grandpa Mills. As young kids, you think back to how far back can I remember? As young kids, I can remember the days and days and days that Bob, myself, Gary Anderson, Gene Mills, and a whole assortment of neighbor kids, we just played Cowboys and Indians in our yard and around the Legion. Legion Hall just seemed to be the focal point for one team on one side, one team on the other side. At age 6, we were playing in the ditch, collecting bottles or collecting frogs or whatever it might have been. We had a big family dog. I believe his name was Hustle. And Bob had him on a leash. Well, truck went by, Hustle decided to go after the truck, Bob had the leash, Bob's femur snapped. And Bob spent 60 days in Mayerthorpe Hospital in a body cast from armpits to toes for that time of traction. I got to spend the better part of 60 days in Mayerthorpe at Grandma and Grandpa's, stealing raisins, stealing cherries from the bake shop, because Grandpa was the baker in Mayerthorpe. There's going to be a poster, well there already is, a poster board put up in the Legion Hall. And on that poster board there was a form, which was the hospital expense form for when Bob was in there. Take a look at it, $10.50 a day to stay. Total bill for 2 months, the outrageous price, $760. Our dad built a curling rink. Can you hear me okay? At the back? My dad built a curling rink in our backyard, and we spent many, many winter hours with jam cans full of frozen water called ice, throwing those things or sliding those things back and forth. Got pictures there of Bob and I and Gary and I think Gene was there too, a few others. In our early teens, we played a lot of unorganized school ground sports, particularly softball, football. Bob was always chosen first. You'd have two captains. Whoever had the first draw, Bob was always, without exception, chosen first. But the better part, the other team always got 2 players. That's how powerful he was. Bob played baseball, softball as a pitcher, and he was a real home run hitter. Much to my chagrin, he always wanted to practice his pitching behind the Legion Hall. Him pitch, me back catcher. And he just terrified me. He could throw so hard, I just sometimes ran away. In high school, Bob was on the, believe it or not, the Sangudo had a high school football team back in the, I guess, 60s, 70s. And we also spent endless winter hours playing organized hockey, but even more hours going to the outdoor rink at Sangudo. Hockey sticks, rubber boots, good for winter, and a tennis ball that we'd play for 5 hours on a Saturday and come home with such frozen feet, we had to put them on the heat register and cry as our feet thawed out. Growing up in Sangudo was a fabulous life as a kid. Lots of fishing, camping, family holidays, gardening. Gary and I remember often walking all the way up to Deep Creek with our fishing equipment, having the bull chases across the field. We had to time our run across the field. And of course, scouting. We were very fortunate in Sangudo to have Claude Gould as our scoutmaster, Wilton Dursberg, Gary Wendt as assistants, and later on, Lawrence Clark as our scoutmaster. And Mom and Dad were very, very instrumental in the whole scouting movement, the behind-the-scenes things, the big scout camp at Oscar every summer. In high school, Bob also worked at the creamery for, I think, 1 or 2 summers. And there he developed a love of cream and butter. He was one of those kids that was always hired by the grain elevator staff to also shovel all the grain out of the bottom of the big farm grain elevators. And spent endless hours on the farm, of Gilbert's farm, working with Colin and Earl, doing an awful lot of farm work. Bob again was just one big, strong guy. He'd be on the, they call it the scooter. You take the bales off the baler, stack them behind you, about, I don't know, 8 or 10 bales, then have to put your feet wide apart, push with your back, and push these bales off. And a lot of grown men couldn't do what Bob could. He would outwork a lot of these guys. In 1968, I was 18, Bob 19 and a half. Bob won an Edmonton Eskimo football program, flight to Jamaica for 2. And of all his friends, he chose to take his little brother. The first day in Jamaica, what does Bob do? Gets on an air mattress and falls asleep on the ocean, or the beach area. He got so sunburned, he spent 2 full days in bed, could barely move. He was like a lobster. He did nothing halfway. And Bob was always there to help me in many aspects of life, always there to help me move. 1972 to Whitecourt, 1974 to Daysland, 1980 to Grande Cache, and good friend Gary and his dad Swede were right there with Swede's truck, lending a helping hand. When we moved to Grande Cache in 1980, we had a rental truck with all our possessions in it, and Bob and another friend came up in a van. Well, they were supposed to arrive, but an hour is late before they got to Grande Cache. Oh, we stopped to go fishing. There was nice string fishing we had to do. Sorry about all the china that was in the back of the truck. I think it all got broken. Sandy said, do you think I was dumb enough to give you the china? Come on. Bob's work life. His first real company, I guess, was called B&D Maintenance. D wasn't for me, it was for partner Dick. They did painting, they shoveled snow off roofs. A lot of this was in Edmonton. Just general construction, and as Reiner said, they got into the home insulation business. And just to clarify that, it was a government-approved program. This formaldehyde was not something Bob just cooked up in a lab. They also had a couple of big projects. The College Plaza Tower over the University of Edmonton, they got a contract to re-roof that whole thing. I think they had a staff of like 20 guys. And then, much to my dismay, we went out to the international airport for a week. And their job was to take out all the caulking between these cement slabs of runway and put in new caulking. I don't know how they talk people into giving those jobs. Bob also got into the motel business. He seemed to think that would be a great way to make money. Well, it was a great way to basically destroy his life, I think. He said he had motels in Mayerthorpe, still the Haven Inn in Mayerthorpe, the one in Edson. I think the man is down to 5 motels. I remember one day he said, here I was, sound asleep at 4 in the morning. The phone rings. Some guy in room 13. Hey, what time is it? End of conversation. And then Bob also thought that he should open up a restaurant or a breakfast part of the Edson Motel, so he'd be putting on a big roaster full of sausages every night to have them ready for morning for breakfast. And he found that it was really a tough job. After that, he got into the real estate business in Mayerthorpe, Century 21, rental houses, which he still owns to this day. Reiner talked about backpacking. Well, Bob and I spent a lot of our life backpacking together. It all started out for us back in the mid-late 70s, I guess, working on the Nordegg Dam, the Lake Abraham. I think the two of us actually built that. Another guy working there said, you know, there's a lake called Pinto Lake. We should hike up into there. Fish like you couldn't imagine. So we took 1 package of soup and 1 small bag of rice, and away we went. Didn't get a bite, nearly froze to death. When Sandy and I moved to Grande Cache in 1980, the following year I was very fortunate to be able to join a group of what became great friends, roughly 10 of us. And we hiked through the region called Wilmore Wilderness, or the Wilmore, should I get this right? Right, we call ourselves the Wilmore Wilderness Wanderers, so the Wilmore Park. Bob hiked with us for about 15 years. The first year, I guess 1981, he had dropped his weight from about 270 down to 195. And he looked very, very much like me. In stature and in face. And there's pictures we've been going through. Even Sandy would say, is that you or Bob? And I only know because I didn't wear that color of shirt that day. Bob just seemed to love cayenne. He thought it was something, see Sylvia, people nodding. It was something that he used as part of his diet plan. He'd have a teaspoon of cayenne, and he didn't buy just Co-op or Safeway cayenne. He went to a health food store, he got like the 100,000 BTU cayenne. And he'd have a teaspoonful of cayenne in a glass of water, and I see Dwayne nodding, and it would help take your appetite away. Well, no wonder you were running around screaming, you were so burning up inside you couldn't even try to eat. But we were backpacking the day Elvis Presley died. We were way up on a mountain, snowed in, and then it turned to rain, and I was freezing to death. He said, put some cayenne on your boots. I did. And then this goes in your boot, under your sock. But as your feet are wet or sweat, it takes about an hour. And then the heat, the furnace starts to turn on. And there's no stopping it. It just burns and burns. One year on one of our backpacking trips, one of the guys, same thing, he was on cold feet at night, just freezing. About 3 o'clock in the morning, we hear some noise. Here's this guy named Jeff, outside, hiking boots off. Well, I guess they wouldn't be able to go to bed. His feet in the creek. And he sat his feet in the creek for about 2 hours, trying to cool them down. For the first backpacking trip, Bob became the camp chef. He loved to cook. We'd arrive at camp, 10 guys, you gotta just make up camp, set up camp for the night. Bob would just flop where the fire was gonna be, gather rocks for the fire, and he'd be there for about 8 hours. He would cook. He would make his famous cafe au lait version of campfire coffee. He'd go and pick, or as we were walking, he'd pick raspberries and saskatoons and blueberries, and he'd put them into the porridge. And then we'd be setting up the lean-to and doing all the other jobs. And there's a jockeying position. You gotta get that comfortable spot in the lean-to. He'd roll in about 10, 11 o'clock at night for the fire. Oh, I get the hill again, or I get the rock to lay on again. For 15 years, it never changed. He just wanted to be by the fire, socializing and cooking. Many years our backpacking trip was in the middle of August. Bob's birthday, August 18th. So I would bake him a birthday cake on the backpacking trip for many, many years. I have a great recipe to share if you want to. Bob was into yoga before most of us knew what yoga was. There's a picture in the tribute of him standing in a creek with his hiking boots on, doing a yoga exercise. But that's also where the war began. One day he was down on his hands and knees doing the lion pose, which is sort of similar to the cat and cow if you know anything about yoga. But you stick your tongue out as far as you can stick it out to stretch your neck muscles. Well, I couldn't let that pass. I walked by with my hiking boot, right across his tongue. Mud all over his tongue. He just sort of gagged and smiled. And a couple days later, I was laying down doing some stretching exercises, and he dropped about a 15-pound rock right on my chest. So it was payback time. We did a lot of ice fishing as kids and adults, and I guess Bob's biggest ice fishing partner was Gary Anderson, and along would come Denny and Gene sometimes. But the story I want to tell you is one of the most incredible things I ever experienced in my life. Bob phoned me and said, come on down to Mayerthorpe, we're going to such and such lake. But the ice is starting to melt, but the fish are really biting. I said, well, how do you get on the ice? Well, we just put a plank across. I've done that before, no big deal. I get down there, and he says, we're taking a ladder and a canoe. So the ice is melted about 10 feet from shore. You can't put a plank across there unless you've got a big long one. So Bob puts a 12-foot extension ladder from shore to ice. The other guy, Gordon Desjardins, one of Bob's renters, Bob called him No Dog. I always knew him as No Dog. Well, why is he called No Dog? Well, all my renters have a dog. He doesn't, so he's No Dog. So Gordon and I put the canoe in the water, and the canoe the bow was at the ice, the stern was at the shore. We just spun it sideways, climbed on the ice, put up our little ice shacks, and climbed out to go ice fishing. We fished all day, had some pretty good luck. Time to come back. Well, it was a warm day, the ice had melted even a little bit more. Gordon and I had no problem getting into the canoe and coming back. But Bob, I brought some props. Here's Bob with his ice auger in one hand, tackle box in the other hand, walking across this ladder, which started to sink. And Bob said, I'm going down. He went down chest deep in this freezing cold water. Never stopped smiling and giggling. Someone got the ladder out, built a big fire. He stripped off naked and warmed off for about 3 hours. Let me just gotta check one thing here. Yeah. I gotta go back to the backpacking for just a moment. This was Bob's backpack. He and I bought matching backpacks years ago. I found this yesterday in his Quonset hut out on the acreage. I didn't think I'd ever see this again. And I was quite shocked. It was mostly empty. I thought he might have clothes in here from 1980s yet. The first backpacking trip we went on, we were coming down off this, mountain edge. And Bob said, my feet are really hurting. I gotta stop. So he opens up his backpack, which was full of like 60, 70 pounds worth of stuff. And he pulls out this little bag. He said, my backpack feels really hurting my back as well. So he opens this up. And inside he has about 20 of these great big spikes. I said, what are those there for? Oh, I don't know. I was putting things away. I just threw them in my back. So just extra weight now. But then he says, I gotta trim my toenails. So he takes off his hiking boots, pulls out his paring knife, sits down, trims his toenails on a rock, puts the stuff away, and away we go. He was never very organized. And speaking of organization, one year on the trip, it's 11 o'clock at night, roll into the lean-to, and Bob pulls out his sleeping bag. It must be the first night of that trip. Oh, what's the matter? Matthew's sleeping bag, kid size. So he tries to crawl in it. It was like a gunny sack race. So luckily it unzipped. He unzipped it like a quilt, and he just lay on the ground and put it over top of him. But it didn't cover all of them. And it was bad mosquitoes, really, really bad mosquitoes. So what did he do? He covered as much of his stuff as he could, and he put one arm out for those mosquitoes for bait, so they leave his face alone. In the morning, he probably had 300 bites on his arm. It was just puffed right up. Angie, you thought your hand was puffed up yesterday? His was like, well, one of his legs. A big surprise here, Bob loved to eat. But he was a man of extremes. He either fasted, or used cayenne, or lived on bone broth, but he loved to gorge on one thing. Another problem. Bob's ice cream. Oh. He would buy this by the tubful. And as much as he would fast to try to lose weight, when it came to ice cream, this goes way back. Rusty, you're part of the reason. Your dad, Uncle Russell, he would fill Bob's bowl with like $40 worth of ice cream. And Bob just kept that love forever. With his love for eating and sibling rivalry, as adults even, we'd be at Mom and Dad's at Sangudo for Thanksgiving dinner. You've got your plate loaded up with turkey and all that good stuff. And first thing you know, Bob's reaching over trying to steal off my plate. I remember one time saying, stop it or I'm gonna get you. He didn't. I stabbed him and pinned his hand on the table with a fork. That hurts, you know. Another time, I smacked his knuckles with a butter knife right across the knuckles. But it never ever stopped him. Bob became best friends with Tom and Monica Muirheim. They had a buffalo and wild boar farm ranch north of Rochford. And Bob became such great friends, to this day Monica calls Bob her brother. I'm not sure how Bob organized this, but he teamed up with the local bread supplier for Mayerthorpe stores. Well, I guess this whole part of the Highway 43, and all of the leftover bread, or bread that the bread supplier would take off the shelves, and donuts and cinnamon buns, Bob would gather and bring a whole truckload out to the farm. And we would go out there, myself and Sandy and Matthew and Alana and our son Aaron, and we would throw bread and donuts to the pigs and feed them. It was just, the kids just absolutely loved it. And Monica had a little orphan pig, I think it was an orphan pig named Butch. It started out in a little toque. It was so tiny and grew up to be a boar the size of this table up here. The kids also got to gather chicken eggs, and for them it was a new experience. Bob was basically a gentle giant, for anyone that knew him. Always happy. He was also the muscle man. He would pack all the bales of shingles up on the roofs for any shingling job. He'd be baling hay on the farm all the time with Gilbert and Dad and Earl and Colin. As was mentioned, he liked to raise chickens and turkeys. We'd butcher and pluck those things. That's when Bob, I think, developed a love for lamb. Oh, he loved to buy lambs and butcher lambs, and to this day, he's still got lamb in his fridge at home. He loved the stock market. He would talk for hours about the stock market. Buy silver, buy silver. He once told me when silver's gonna hit $100 an ounce next year. And if it doesn't, I'll pay for a family holiday for you guys to go to Hawaii. Well, time went by, silver went down, and the holiday never happened. And for those people that followed Bob's advice, often lost money. Hey, Gary. Matthew made mention to Bob's stroke in 2008. In Ottawa, he was intensive care. He was in such bad shape. Tubes going everywhere. He made a slight recovery though within a week or so that he could say a few words, got a little bit of movement back to the right side of his body. And one night after the hockey game, we were in Ottawa because Lana was playing Nationals University hockey, and Bob had come there to see the games too, and had a stroke. I went to visit Bob in the hospital, and there was still some food on the tray beside him. I don't think he could feed himself. I think he was being fed by the nurse. And I noticed a container sitting on the tray, and I said, "Oh, Bob, you didn't eat your pudding. Do you want some?" So I opened it up, and I gave him a little bit on a spoon, and I said, "What's the matter?" That was it. I gave him another spoonful. Not pudding, gravy. And then sadly, he had a massive internal bleed after a stroke. And this was way worse than the original stroke. It really set him back. He eventually got back to the University Hospital, and then the Glenrose Hospital, where he learned to take a few steps. He couldn't move. He really couldn't move. I was there watching him taking some of his first steps, crying out in pain. He said, "I'll walk out of here." And he did. He walked out of the Glenrose, poorly, but he walked out. And then he spent just about a year in Pinocchio at the Brain Rehab Center. And when I go down to visit them, it was a long distance from Grande Cache to Pinoca, so I didn't visit that often, unfortunately, but they told me he was probably the most determined patient they ever had. And he walked out of Pinoca brain rehab, speaking, walking, and he wrote better than he ever had, and he shuffled cards better than he ever had. It was just amazing. And he continued to improve at home for the next couple of years. He eventually got his driver's license back and started going to Whitecourt, to the fitness center at Whitecourt. And that lasted for a couple of years, but then over time, I guess we all just get lazy, and he didn't go anymore. His mobility started to reduce to the point where he really wasn't that good of a walker his last few years. But then we also know that his knees were just basically bone on bone for a couple of decades. He lived in a lot of pain. Didn't usually grumble though. Or 2018, 2019, Bob, Matthew, Denny Lowry went through, I think, close to a 2-year regulatory process to be licensed to open their first cannabis shop in Mayerthorpe and their second one in Edson. For the past year, Bob and Angie have shared their lives together and made each other very happy. As Bob said, Angie, you made my dreams come true. So, thank you, Angie, for putting that huge smile on Bob's face and in his heart. Bob and I were very fortunate to have such wonderful parents who influenced our lives greatly. From Mom, Bob learned the love of gardening and cooking. From Dad, always time to stop whatever you're doing and visit, and visit, and visit. And from both of them, the love of camping. Bob passed away October 25th, 2021, from COVID, as Matthew said, and we all know. October 25th, the same day that Grandpa Climby died decades before. Bob, you were a fabulous, caring brother. I'll miss you dearly, as will Matt, Angie, and numerous other friends and family. Bob loved to garden. Always grew a garden way bigger than he could handle. He got a lot of produce out of it, but boy, were there a lot of weeds. So I said, I'm going to plant 1 row each year in my garden, and I'm going to not weed it. In memory of Bob. Thank you.
Thank you, Doug, for those wonderful memories that you shared with your brother. At this time, we're going to see the pictures that are going to put in perspective some of those experiences. What a lot of stories. What a lot of wonderful memories. Thank you, Matthew and Bob, for taking the time to tell me about your father and your brother. I was surprised to hear that Bob's passion was to become a naturopath right in the beginning, and that he had a degree in biological sciences and had taken courses in pharmacy in university. That was a side to Bob that I had no knowledge of. As a dad, Bob was a mentor and role model for his son, as we've already heard. We spent a lot of time ice fishing and camping, going to the hockey games and all that kind of stuff, canoeing on the Pembina River. And more recently, you guys talked a lot of real estate, a lot of business. Doug remembers Bob as his best friend growing up. You guys enjoyed a lot of different sports, as you explained, and I'm so glad that you explained all this paraphernalia on the church platform that I couldn't quite figure out why it was here. As we heard, Bob loved to cook and loved to do various different things. He spent a lot of time in his garden. He called it his therapy. And he made a lot of jams from blackberries, choke cherries, and he loved to eat jam too. And then something else, he was really well known for his carrot juice. I didn't even know that was a thing. Which went along with his many 30-day fasts. He was a strong man, and when he had the stroke, he was unable to use his one side. As we heard, he didn't give up. He just kept working, kept trying, until he could walk out of there on his own. That's a whole lot of determination. King David, the author of the 23rd Psalm, was a shepherd as a young man. He took his flock of sheep from one pasture to another, where the grass was green and plentiful. Now, if you know anything about Israel, the land is quite hilly and there are some deep valleys to get from one pasture to another. And one of those valleys is actually called the Valley of the Shadow of Death, because it's very treacherous, it's very dark, and it's a very deep valley. The shepherd would just lead his flock through the valley, knowing that there were bears, wolves, lions that could be looking for lunch. Now, just think, put yourself in that place. You're following your shepherd, when suddenly you hear this menacing growl, and you're scared. That's when the shepherd grabs his rod and goes after the wolf and kills it. You go a little bit farther down the road or down that path, and you see this delicious looking plant and you're hungry, so you start towards it. But you don't see that there's a steep incline and you find yourself falling down this hill. Your shepherd hears your terrified bleating and grabs his staff, you know, that shepherd's crook, and gently pulls you back up to safety. Now listen to the words again. Yea, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil, for thou art with me. Thy rod and thy staff, they comfort me. When God is your shepherd, there may be danger all around you. You may be hurt and crying, but God will come to your rescue. He hears our cries for help. He knows the danger that we're in. He knows the grief of your heart. And as you mourn for your father, your brother, your friend, if you don't know God as your shepherd, all you have to do is ask him, God, I know I can't protect myself. I need help in my pain and grief. Would you just become my shepherd? Let's pray. Father, I thank you that you're always willing and able to help us, that you listen and you answer us when we pray. You hear our hearts cry and you answer. We thank you for eternal life that we can have through your Son, Jesus. Heavenly Father, I pray that each person here today would experience the deep, abiding peace that comes only from you. Help us, Father, to be willing to share our lives with you and get to know you better than we have before. God, I pray today that you would comfort, give us confidence that you will never leave us or forsake us. We ask your Holy Spirit to comfort, lead, and guide Matthew and Doug and their friends so that they will have the strength to meet the days to come with steadfastness and patience, not sorrowing without hope, but in thankfulness and in the joyful hope of eternal life. Together we pray, Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our trespasses, as we forgive those who trespass against us. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. For thine is the kingdom, the power, and the glory, forever and ever. Amen. Thank you.
Some say love is a river that drowns the tender reed. Some say love
As we've gathered here again, and you've listened to all the eulogies and you've listened to the tributes, how will you remember Bob? Just one word. I don't want a whole story, just one word, okay?
Generous,
Generosity.
Mm-hmm.
kind,
Friendly. Caring.
Caring, yeah.
Hungry.
These are wonderful memories to have, and those will be what you keep with you as time goes on. I realize that this time of parting is the most difficult, but let us begin by being thankful and grateful for Bob's life. Remembering all those intangibles, the impact of Bob's life on yours. You may bring to mind his smile, his frown, his quizzical look, his sense of humor, his great personality, and the way he lived his life. Remember all those significant moments and the fun times you had with him, the times you might have struggled with him, and the times you tried to support him. You'll remember Bob's life by the memories he leaves behind. But most of all, remember him with love as long as you live. Those of us who feel deeply will grieve deeply. We come into this world with nothing and we leave with nothing. But the memories we leave behind with our families and our friends are a mark of our life's success. Tenderly, lovingly, reverently, we commit the spirit and body of Robert James Donahue to a more peaceful place. We give thanks for your life and for your 73 years of love, friendship, and memories. We now say farewell. May you rest in peace. Thank you, Bob. Thank you for the good times. Thank you for your hard work. Thank you for your love and laughter. Thank you for being you. You filled your niche and you've accomplished your task. You leave this world a richer place than you found it. And with great respect, we bid you a final farewell. You will live on in the hearts of everyone you touched and nurtured while you lived on this earth. And holding the thoughts of Bob in your hearts means for you that death ends a life, but not a relationship. Bob, may you leave lasting, loving memories of your life with us, and may you rest peacefully, loving father, brother, and friend. Let us pray. Heavenly Father, we've come to the most difficult part of this service, where we bid a final farewell. Thank you for your peace and for your comfort at this time. Be with each of us, Father, as we remember Bob. In your name we pray. Amen. If you'd like to come forward, touch the urn if you would like to, you're welcome to do so.
Yeah.
thank you all for coming. It's so awesome. Really appreciate it. My dad would love it.
As Gary pointed out to me, I meant to say it at the church, but I never. Mom and Dad, Bob, both, they're all died at age 73. I'm 71, so I better keep looking over my shoulder.